The Great Circus nickname, known for Formula One, a term that was born in the category when it was just beginning in the 1950s, a term related to the shows that took place in the Roman circus. This is due to the picturesque atmosphere and the spectacular show the single-seaters offered on the track during that era's races. This captivating sport is known for delivering grand, dramatic spectacles that have given us historic moments in the discipline on numerous occasions, like epic rivalries, the Great Circus, spectacular magic, drama, suspense, and thrilling grand prizes. Throughout the more than 70 years of Formula history, we have experienced grand prizes that have brought our emotions to the surface, and that have kept us on tenterhooks, due to how grand a Formula One competition can become. Regrettably, history is not always written in the most optimal manner. Like the Big Circus, it has made us jump with excitement over grand prizes, but also tormented us with grotesque, embarrassing races and disappointing rewards that directly mock millions of sports fans. In this piece, we'll explore the depths of history to uncover those embarrassing grand prizes that the Queen category would undoubtedly prefer to erase from the records. Grand prizes filled with poor choices have often turned our excitement for a contest into shared feelings of anger and frustration. So, without further ado for the moment, welcome to the top 5 most embarrassing grand prizes in the history of Formula. The list that we will present to you today will put us in the need to make several jumps in time. And the first of them will be 1984. A season defined by the birth of a motor racing legend and the epic duel between Alain Prost and Niki Lauda. Additionally, a Grand Prix was held that jeopardized the physical safety of the participating drivers. From the 1970s, Formula One became fixated on captivating the United States audience. And this is no surprise, as the North American country's market is huge and with an exploitation potential perhaps like no other. This led the Big Circus to launch an aggressive expansion campaign in the United States, with grand prizes contested on American soil. Well, for Formula One, it was not enough with the United States Grand Prix, which in those years was usually held at the Watkins Glen circuit, but other venues were also needed. For example, the United States West Grand Prix at the Long Beach circuit, the Las Vegas Grand Prix at the infamous Caesar Palace parking lot circuit, and the United States East Grand Prix at the Detroit Street circuit. The Dallas Grand Prix from 1984 ranks 5th on this list. The aforementioned Grand Prix was a valid round for the Formula One World Championship of that season. A controversial competition set for July 8th, questioned from its inception by drivers, team leaders, and sports experts. You might wonder why, dear viewer. The answer is very simple. Texas in summer is literally hell on earth, a state where the heat can easily exceed 40 degrees Celsius. Attempting to organize a Formula One Grand Prix under such conditions appeared utterly insane. Besides pushing drivers' physical endurance to the limit, there was the fear that the abrasive heat and speed of the Formula Ones would start to destroy the asphalt of the Fair Park Street Circuit, which is where this race would take place, which in fact made people fear its imminent cancellation. But for the event organizers, the logic of the aforementioned issues would rather be a challenge for them. Because despite constantly being reminded of the dangers of organizing that competition, only one thing was going through these geniuses' heads. Of course it can be done. As mothers were not going to do it. Well, this event would not only be another great prize for the city, but it would be the perfect window for Dallas to show that it was a world-class city. However, the expected date arrived, and with it the problems that everyone was expecting. As it didn't take even a day to show what a terrible idea it had been to organize that grand prize on that particular date, well, the temperature that day was over 40 degrees Celsius, as the Grand Prix organizers had been warned. On the same Friday practice session, the asphalt began to lift as the cars passed over it. To tell you that a supporting category called Can-Am damaged the track to such an extent that the teams and drivers threatened to boycott the race. And the organization had no choice but to resurface the circuit overnight. Due to high temperatures, the new asphalt was covered with ice to prevent deterioration and accelerate recovery. But this embarrassing race had only just begun. The organization moved the race 3 hours earlier to avoid high temperatures. But that effort also ended up being useless, as the drivers would once again have to face a race with conditions of over 40 degrees temperature, and it turned out to be a punishment for the drivers who would have to face a circuit that was falling apart and a heat worthy of hell. And this image of Nigel Mansell fainting after pushing his car in the last meters, It's the perfect example of how difficult this competition turned out to be for all the drivers involved. And all of this caused by a political decision, and above all, an economic decision. Position number 5. One of the hottest races in the history of Formula One, the Dallas Grand Prix of 1984. Position number 4 on this top is a story fresh out of the oven. What is considered by many as the most embarrassing Grand Prix in the history of Formula One. Personally, I don't see it that way. But undoubtedly, it was among the most embarrassing spectacles ever, and a mockery to the fans, but above all to the attendees of that competition. The 2021 Belgian Grand Prix will be remembered as the day the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile made a mockery of us all. A race that lasted the beautiful amount of 3 laps and had us waiting for several hours behind the televisions, only for it to not happen in the end. But yes, there are too many points, but we have to explain the context in which things happened. Days before the start of the race, the threat of rain was constant and excited the fans, with a drenched race on one of the best racing circuits in the world. On Saturday, heavy rain fell on the Spa-Francorchamps circuit as predicted. And although the classification was not affected by any cancellation, right? Lando Norris's high-speed crash on the Eau Rouge climb left a significant scare. Despite this, the classification finished without major regrets. But for Sunday, the weather forecast was more rain and much stronger. And that prediction came true. Because the strong gusts of wind and the rain that was falling hard were totally evident. Despite the rain, the circuit did not appear to be flooding. However, a problem would greatly complicate things. Heavy mist settled over the Belgian layout, reducing visibility. The spray from the Formula One cars and ongoing rain made it impossible for the competitors to see if the cars started racing. Up to that point, the decisions were made correctly. The track's complexity necessitated a minimum safety margin to start the race. The problem itself is not this decision, but what followed several hours later. According to the radars of the teams in Formula One, the rain was expected to persist for the rest of the day. But the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile had unwavering faith and hoped that after a few hours the rain would provide a brief window to commence the race. As more hours passed, the track's visibility decreased due to diminishing sunlight. This led to several delays orchestrated by Formula One. Multiple delays prevented the race from starting due to the conditions. However, after a few hours, a small light was visible at the tunnel's end. Because the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile soon announced that it would make an effort to give us at least 1 hour of racing. After countless hours of waiting, it felt like a heavenly gift. Minutes after the announcement, the single-seaters were started. Drivers entered their vehicles, and behind the safety car, it appeared the race would finally begin. However, this is where the farce of the 2021 Belgian Grand Prix begins. Because 3 laps after the cars went out to supposedly start the race. The following would happen for each of Fur's turns, but Mazepin's record is 18. I want to tell you something. Did I imagine it? 3 laps will qualify with half points, ending the event. The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile never intended for the race to start. It only intended for 3 laps to be run behind the safety car, thus validating the Belgian Grand Prix. This is simply for economic reasons. By validating the race, the Formula One management avoids refunding the circuit's fee for organizing the event. Instead of canceling a race that was known from the start to have poor weather conditions, the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile decided to play with the fans watching the Grand Prix on TV, and especially those who bought tickets to witness this mockery. And mind you, don't misunderstand me. Obviously, the track was not fit to be raced that day, but had better decisions been made, they could have saved us all a good amount of time. But in the end, this did not happen. And all because of the interest of the Formula One management in having 3 measly laps. Position 4, the absurd 2021 Belgian Grand Prix. The bronze of this list is a scenario similar to the previous position, but on this occasion there was a race to be disputed, but under conditions too precarious for a category like Formula One. To such an extent that a Grand Prix was run on a circuit that wasn't even finished. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the story of the South Korean Grand Prix of the year 2010. A story full of drama. Again, stupid decisions from a certain body, but above all, haste. Lots of haste. The South Korean Grand Prix story starts in 2007 when Formula One aimed to exploit Asian markets. It would sign a contract with the aforementioned country to be the host of a Grand Prix starting from the 2010 season. However, the organization envisioned an ambitious and megalomaniac project, which could be divided into two parts. The first part was to build a brand new racetrack in a completely new location that we will know as Yongan. And the second part was to create a completely new city and port around the circuit. And once its construction was completed, the circuit would become part of the road network of this new city. However, a project this big needs substantial funds and time. And both are things that would soon start to run out for the organization. Due to immediate economic issues, the track's construction faced significant delays beyond the planned completion dates. The race celebration date was nearing, and the circuit still faced issues with completion, which, in addition to everything previously said, it should also be added that the weather was turning out to be a real nightmare for the company hired for the construction. A whole host of situations that were causing delays and, above all, were generating uncertainty as to whether the race could be held. Just 2 months before its category debut, the circuit was still being built, with neither the asphalt nor the entire track surface completed. Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile regulations at the time required the final review to proceed with the Grand Prix be done 90 days before the race. However, the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile ignored the issues and allowed the Grand Prix to proceed, likely due to economic interests. With just over 2 weeks to go, the asphalt was adhered to the circuit. The Korea International Circuit was homologated to host its Grand Prix 12 days before the race. The circuit was incomplete with only the main buildings ready on time. Drivers noticed this as soon as they arrived at the track. Some noticed that workers, including people painting the facilities and drivers like Sebastian Vettel, were still present. They found debris and materials like nails within the layout, something that only highlighted the lack of professionalism of the people who organized the race. But finally, the stipulated date would arrive. But on practice Friday, things would not improve at all. The drivers encountered extremely slippery asphalt because it had been newly laid weeks prior. However, the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile and track officials hoped for improvements on race day, but unfortunately the opposite occurred. Because a rainstorm hit the circuit, and due to the combination of the slippery asphalt, the dirt on the track and the grime spray thrown by the cars as they sped by, it made it completely impossible for them to compete if the weather did not improve, and this forced a stoppage of almost 2 hours waiting for the rain to give a break and allow the race to be contested. When the weather improved, the cars resumed the adventure of this chaotic Grand Prix. Again, we felt the effects of the race's poor organization, as the asphalt remained in terrible condition due to the water. We had to witness the most tedious parade of drivers in Formula One history forced upon us. 14 laps behind the safety car. I've said it many times and will continue repeating it. Those 14 laps were the test of love that anyone had for F1 at that time. However, in the end, the race was able to take place and, in fact, turned out to be a great prize, even entertaining, with an exciting finish. However, this Grand Prix undoubtedly should have premiered in 2011, avoiding the embarrassment of the 2010 edition. As a love letter to the fans, the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile awarded the prize to the best organized event of the year. 2010, position number 3, the 2010 Korean Grand Prix. The next story, ranking second, will transport us to this part of the world. More precisely, to the country that saw me born, and the country that currently has one of the most successful and best organized grand prizes on the planet. My beloved Mexico currently has a fascinating event, but in 1970 had a race whose circumstances could have caused a tragedy and a real disaster. For this story, we will have to move to the end of the first stage of Formula One in our country. The 1970 Mexican Grand Prix, which was the final race of the Formula One World Championship that year. There was much anticipation among Mexicans, as local hero Pedro Rodriguez, who had a victory and a podium, was enjoying a strong season. And that ignited this passion which wanted to see their driver on the podium at home. And why not win this race in front of the crowd that would gather at the then called Magdalena Machuca racetrack? However, the organization could not even begin to imagine the consequences that would come later, with so many fans wanting to see this local driver. As was practically to be expected, tickets sold out quickly, and many people would virtually be left without the possibility of experiencing this event. This caused some attendees and people who wanted to see the race to knock down the barriers that were placed around the circuit, and they entered to sit next to the track, where the single-seaters would pass at full speed, eventually becoming a safety issue, which would cause a huge delay for the start of the race. This in an attempt to convince people to return to the stands and move away from the vicinity of the circuit. But neither the police nor the military, not even the pilots who came out with megaphones to ask the attendees to return to their seats, could they manage to control the overcrowding of the property? People were still sitting just a few meters from the circuit, where if a car had an accident, it could cause a real tragedy. And Formula One threatened to cancel the race if it could not be ensured that the attendees would withdraw from the circuit. The Mexican Grand Prix organizers promised the category that no one would cross the track while the cars were running. And for obviously economic reasons, the big circus had no choice but to settle for that and let the cars go out on the track. But the threat of canceling the race or making it a non-scoring date was still on the radar. Fortunately, the race seemed to be proceeding mostly without issues. And despite the crowd around the circuit, the race was going wonderfully. However, in lap 33, an event would occur that would make the organization want to bury their face in the ground like an ostrich out of embarrassment. Because a dog came out of nowhere, got onto the circuit and was run over by Jackie Stewart, who couldn't react and couldn't avoid the hit that would end up killing the dog, and force him to withdraw from the competition due to the damage caused, this forced the race to momentarily stop to clean the track. And although it resumed minutes later, the driver slowed down, just wishing to end this chaos, due to the fear that something more serious could happen. Ultimately, the race concluded without any tragic incidents. However, Formula One's anger led to the decision to remove Mexico's spot and ban the category's competitions in the country for at least 16 years, until Mexico could demonstrate safety capacity and facilities similar to the best countries in the world. Formula One didn't return to this country until 1986, when the big circus resumed its second stage in the category. Position number 2, the chaotic Grand Prix of Mexico of 1970. Our top pick is likely the most predictable choice in this channel's history. But to snatch away the place this competition deserves just to create uncertainty would be a disrespect to the dark history of Formula One. The Grand Prix wanted the top category of motor racing to be utterly embarrassed, and whose consequences were absolute madness, to the extent of what happened on June 19th of the year. 2005 would cost the host circuit of the United States Grand Prix its place in the Formula Mesa. The Indianapolis drama. 2005, the more than well-known case of when only 6 cars competed in a Grand Prix. The story of this more than shameful chapter goes as follows. In that year, there was a tire supplier war on the Formula One grid, where 2 companies could supply the single-seaters with tires and were directly selected by the different teams of the Grand Circus. These were Michelin and Bridgestone. The French brand supplied tires to 7 teams, including Honda, Renault, BMW, Williams, McLaren, Sauber, Red Bull, and Toyota, while the Japanese brand only provided tires to 3 teams: Ferrari, Jordan, and Minardi. This fact is crucial, but we'll revisit it later. Round 9 of the 2005 World Championship was the United States Grand Prix at the legendary Indianapolis circuit, a track that is normally used as a super speedway, but which Formula One adapted to race on part of this oval layout, and a complex inside it, resulting in a 4.2-kilometer circuit that Formula One visited starting from the year 2000. The track's main draw was the stunning banked curve that the single-seaters hit at top speed. But precisely on that date would be the trigger for the disaster that we would experience on Sunday. But let's not get ahead of ourselves and start this story where it belongs. On Friday's practice day, more precisely in free practice number 2, where Ralf Schumacher would have a very hard accident on the banked curve, under somewhat strange conditions. As he was going through this curve, his tire would burst for no apparent reason and send him straight and at a very high speed into the wall of the superspeedway. Besides the mentioned accident, other cars with Michelin tires started having the same puncture issues, something that had caused a lot of concern to the French brand, but to which they would quickly find the cause of the problem. The banked curve at Indianapolis caused tremendous stress on the Michelin tires, leading to punctures. Faced with this, the French brand tried to bring another type of emergency compound to the circuit, but the result would still be the same. Dangerous explosions after just a few turns of those tires. Faced with this huge problem, Pierre Dupasquier and Nick Shorrock, representatives of Michelin, sent a letter to Charlie Whiting, race director of, explaining that they didn't know why the tires were bursting, and that unless the speed was slowed down at turn number 13, La Peraltada. They couldn't guarantee that the tires would last beyond 10 laps. However, Whiting would not take action and would only scold the French brand for not bringing suitable tires for this race. In response to this, Michelin would have no choice but to organize a meeting hours before the race with the circuit director, the heads of the Formula One teams, and Bernie Ecclestone. This was to find a solution and allow the race to continue, as the punctures the teams were suffering were a serious safety issue for the drivers. At the meeting, solutions were proposed, including drivers limiting speed when entering turn 13 to prevent tire wear, making pit stops every 10 laps, and the team's favorite? To install an improvised chicane before entering that turn to prevent it from being a problem for the tires. However, despite the general consensus approving this solution, Jan Todt, then Ferrari team director, categorically refused and decided not to attend the meeting. But the solution was already on the table after the meeting ended: to add a chicane and make the 2005 Indianapolis Grand Prix a non-championship race for that season's World Championship. And even Ferrari was offered to keep the points, and the Michelin teams would go with zeros, but that the race could be held. However, this solution was quickly blocked by the then head of the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile, Max Mosley, who threatened severe punishments to the circuit, to the American Commission of, and to the teams in case they made a non-scoring date or modified the layout. After the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile president's refusal, Michelin threatened to withdraw their cars from the Grand Prix. This caused great distress among the teams as time was running out and the race was about to begin. At this point, there was no consensus or common agreement between the Ferrari teams and the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile, leaving the realization of the competition still uncertain. But the cars lined up on the starting grid, and for a moment it appeared the Grand Prix would occur. The cars began their formation lap towards the finish line. But just at that moment would begin the greatest embarrassment in the history of Formula One.
Are they getting ready over there? Few people in Renona, although we do see someone with... Pit lane. Here's Schumacher. Traffic light.
Traffic light. Traffic light, traffic light. That's going to start. The Jordans and the...
Minardi traffic light that turns off.
The race starts with six cars on the grid. Never seen before. Incredible situation. It's perpendicular. 6 cars.
As stated earlier in the video, 7 teams used Michelin tires. These are 14 cars, 14 single-seaters that had withdrawn from the competition before it began. Only 6 cars left the starting grid, being the sole runners that day. The United States Grand Prix, a competition that only had 6 single-seaters. And the whole world witnessing the biggest embarrassment in the history of Formula One. The scandal was so immense that several broadcasters cut the transmission, claiming there was no interest in watching 6 cars spin on the track. As expected, the fans' fury quickly surfaced. People were shouting and making banners, cursing the family and the deceased of the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile and Formula Racing. They readily shouted harsher insults, demanding a refund for the tickets they purchased for that race. In the end, the decadent show ended with a Ferrari 1-2, led by Michael Schumacher, and with the first and only podium of Thiago Monteiro in this category, leaving us with the worst race in the history of Formula One and a very bitter pill to swallow for all fans of this sport. Number 1 spot, the most shameful chapter in the history of the highest category of motor racing, the United States Grand Prix of the Year, 2005. And with that, we conclude today's short video. But now I want to know, what are your thoughts on this top 5 list? Do you know any other embarrassing big prize stories you wish were included in this list? Leave all your opinions in the comments section because, believe me, I will be delighted to read each and every one of you. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and turn on notifications to know when I upload new videos. Share it with your friends. I invite you to follow us on our Instagram and Twitter social networks, whose link will be in the description of this video. And see you in the next edition of The Tops, The Resins, or the stories we tell on this Skyline Racing channel. Thanks for tuning in, and see you later.